The pressure hull groans when you go deep, and after 22 years on boats, I had stopped hearing it. You learn to file it away, the way you stop hearing your own heartbeat or the hum of a refrigerator in your kitchen. The steel talks all day long, expanding and contracting, settling against the sea. And a man who jumps at every creak doesn't last a month underwater. So I had trained myself not to hear it, the way every good submariner does. That night, I heard it. We were at 400 feet in the Norwegian Sea, running silent, deep under a black ocean that pressed in on us from every side. And the hull popped twice like knuckles cracking. Two flat, percussive sounds that traveled down the length of the boat. And for the first time in my entire career, I wanted to be on the surface where I could see the sky. I wanted air I hadn't made myself. I wanted to know which way was up by looking, instead of by trusting a gauge. We had lost contact with Fleet Command 6 hours earlier. Not the slow kind of loss where the signal fades and degrades and you chase it across frequencies, tuning and retuning. Watching the bars drop one at a time until the last thread snaps. That kind of loss you can argue with. That kind of loss feels like weather. Like something that will pass. No, this was the clean kind. One moment we had a steady stream coming through the floating wire, the long, thin antenna we trail behind us near the surface, routine traffic flowing in, weather reports, position updates, the usual encrypted nonsense that mostly told us nothing was happening anywhere in the world. The pressure hull groans when you go deep, and after 22 years on boats, I had stopped hearing it. You learn to file it away, the way you stop hearing your own heartbeat or the hum of a refrigerator in your kitchen. The steel talks all day long, expanding and contracting, settling against the sea. And a man who jumps at every creak doesn't last a month underwater. So I had trained myself not to hear it, the way every good submariner does. That night, I heard it. We were at 400 feet in the Norwegian Sea, running silent, deep under a black ocean that pressed in on us from every side. And the hull popped twice like knuckles cracking. Two flat, percussive sounds that traveled down the length of the boat. And for the first time in my entire career, I wanted to be on the surface where I could see the sky. I wanted air I hadn't made myself. I wanted to know which way was up by looking, instead of by trusting a gauge. We had lost contact with Fleet Command 6 hours earlier. Not the slow kind of loss where the signal fades and degrades and you chase it across frequencies, tuning and retuning. Watching the bars drop one at a time until the last thread snaps. That kind of loss you can argue with. That kind of loss feels like weather. Like something that will pass. No, this was the clean kind. One moment we had a steady stream coming through the floating wire, the long, thin antenna we trail behind us near the surface, routine traffic flowing in, weather reports, position updates, the usual encrypted nonsense that mostly told us nothing was happening anywhere in the world. And the next moment, there was nothing. No static, no carrier wave, not even the empty hiss of a channel waiting to be filled. Just the absence of a thing that had been there my whole adult life. The way you'd feel the absence of the floor if it vanished from under your feet between one step and the next. The last message we received was not routine. It came in fragments. Flagged priority flash, the highest precedence there is. The kind of message that in 22 years I had seen maybe a handful of times. Our radio man wrote it down by hand on a yellow message pad because he didn't trust the printer to get it right. And his handwriting, which I saw later, got worse with every line. The letters scrawling and tilting as whatever he was reading sank into him. It said, "First infected reported Bergen Naval Hospital. Containment failing. All vessels maintain position. Await further." And then 6 hours of silence, and a hull that wouldn't stop talking, and 131 people pretending to sleep in a steel tube while the world above them did something none of us had words for. My name is Ruben Vandermeer. I am 51 years old, and I was the chief of the boat on the USS Cormorant, which meant I was the oldest enlisted man aboard and the one the captain looked at when he wanted to know what the crew was really thinking, not what they'd say in front of an officer. The COB is a strange job. You aren't in the chain of command the way the officers are, but you carry more weight than any single rank can hold. Because you are the bridge between the men who run the boat with their hands and the men who decide where the boat goes. I had ridden boats since I was 19 years old. I had been a young sailor terrified of the dark water and an old chief who slept like a baby at 600 feet. I knew the sound of a healthy reactor and the sound of a frightened man pretending he wasn't. And by midnight, on that first day, I was hearing a great deal of the second one all over my boat. Before I tell you the rest, I want to say thank you to everyone who keeps coming back for these stories. And if this is your first time down here in the dark with me, welcome aboard. If grounded survival stories like this are your kind of thing, subscribe, leave a comment, and stay with us through the whole run, because it genuinely helps this channel keep going. Now let me take you back down to 400 feet, where the thing that scared me most wasn't the silence. It was what came through the silence next. The Cormorant was a fast attack boat, not a missile boat, which meant we were built to hunt and to listen, rather than to wait and to threaten. A missile boat hides and stays hidden, a black hole in the ocean with the end of the world in its belly. A fast attack boat goes looking. We had a sonar suite that could hear a whale break wind from 40 miles out, that could pick the specific signature of a Russian propeller out of a sea full of noise and tell you the class of vessel, sometimes the very hull, by the song its screws made in the water. Listening was the whole point of us. We were a 100-yard ear made of steel. And that detail matters, so hold on to it, because everything that happened later happened because of how well we could hear and how well something else could hear us. We carried 131 souls. We had been at sea for 38 days of a planned 90-day patrol, shadowing Russian movements in the high north, up where the cold comes off the ice, and the water layers itself into strange, invisible walls of temperature and salt. We were good at our jobs and bored out of our skulls, which is the natural and correct state of a submariner on patrol. Boredom means nothing has gone wrong. Boredom is the goal. Then Bergen happened, and the boredom turned into something with teeth and waited at the back of every man's eyes. Our captain was a man named Halsey Okonkwo, 44 years old, sharp as a fresh wire and twice as tense. He'd come up through the engineering side, the nuclear side, which means he trusted systems more than he trusted people. And that is not a flaw in a submarine commander. It is a job requirement. A boat is a machine, and a captain who loves the machine and understands it down to the valve. And the gauge is a captain who keeps you alive. When the contact dropped, he did not panic. I watched him. He stood in the control room with his hands flat on the chart table, his shoulders square, and he waited 11 full minutes before he said a word, just listening while the radioman tried every option in the book, one after another, working down the list of ways to reach the world. Floating wire, deployed and retrimmed, buoyant antenna, the extremely low frequency receiver that can pull a signal through hundreds of feet of seawater. Nothing came back from any of them. 11 minutes is a very long time to stand in silence in a room full of frightened people. And he gave them every second of it, because the alternative was to react too fast and let them see fear move through him. "Chief," he said finally. And he didn't look up from the chart. His voice was low and even. When was the last time the entire fleet broadcast went dark at once? Never, sir, I said. Not in my time, not in anyone's time I ever served with. Mine either. He tapped one finger on the chart twice, on the little penciled notation marking the boundaries of our patrol box. A jammer can kill a frequency. A jammer can't kill all of them, all at once, across the whole spectrum. ELF runs on a transmitter the size of a town. Miles of buried cable, you can't just switch it off. To take it down, you'd have to physically pull the apparatus offline. The transmitters, the relay stations, the satellites overhead, all of it, at the same moment. He said it like a man reading off a fault tree, working through the failure modes one by one, ruling them out, and not liking where the process was leading him. Or nobody's left to run them, said our navigator, a quiet woman named Delphine Aubrey, a lieutenant 30 years old, the only officer aboard who could do celestial navigation by hand without breaking a sweat, who could find our position on the curved earth with a sextant and a watch and a table of numbers when every electronic system failed. She said it flat, the way you'd call out a sounding, a depth reading, just a number, just a fact. And the control room went very still. The dim red battle lighting made the stillness worse somehow, turned all those faces into something carved. Okonkwo finally looked up. We don't speculate. We have orders. Maintain position, await further. So we maintain position. But I had known him 3 years, had stood watch beside him through long, dull nights and one or two that weren't dull at all, and I saw the muscle move in his jaw, a small involuntary thing, and I understood that he had already run the same arithmetic Delphine had run out loud, and that the arithmetic was very bad. Here's the thing that people who have never served on a submarine do not understand, and I need you to understand it, because everything that follows lives or dies on this one fact. We are the most isolated human beings on the planet. Astronauts can see the Earth hanging there blue and whole beneath them. They have a constant voice in their ear, telemetry, mission control, a thread that never breaks. We go down and we vanish, completely, by design. Our entire value as a weapon is that nobody, not even our own side most of the time, knows exactly where we are. And our only thread to the world above is that radio. And when that thread is cut, we are not just out of touch. We are blind, deaf, and entombed in a steel tube that we ourselves keep alive, breath by breath. The boat makes its own oxygen by splitting seawater with electricity from the reactor. It makes its own fresh water the same way. It scrubs the carbon dioxide out of the air with chemicals so we don't suffocate on what we exhale. It makes its own power, endlessly, from a chunk of metal hotter than the sun's surface sitting 40 feet behind where I slept. We could, in theory, stay down for months. The only hard limit was food, and we had food in every spare corner, cans stacked under the deck plates, crates lashed in passageways. So when the world went silent, we did not have to surface. We were not in immediate danger. That was supposed to be our safety. The deep was supposed to be the one place nothing could reach us. It became our prison, and it became something far worse than a prison. And I'm getting ahead of myself. I want you to picture the first 48 hours, because that is where the real fear lives. Before anything dramatic happened at all. It lived in the small things. It lived in the mess decks at breakfast, that low-ceilinged compartment with its bolted-down tables and the smell of coffee and bacon grease that never quite leaves the air. Where 100 men and women who normally argued about football and complained that the eggs were powdered, sat too quiet, hunched over their trays. And you could hear forks scraping on metal like the room was holding its breath. It lived in the way the cooks kept the portions exactly the same as always, because Okonkwo had ordered no change to routine. And that very normality began to feel like a lie we were all telling one another. A thin, painted-on calm stretched over something none of us would name. It lived in the way men lingered by the few phones and printers that connected one part of the boat to another, as if a message might come through from somewhere, anywhere, even though they knew the only messages now came from inside our own hull. It lived in the way the youngest sailors started shadowing the older ones, the way frightened animals drift toward the herd. And it lived in the torpedo room, the big forward compartment where the weapons rack along the bulkheads, where a young weapons tech named Solis had quietly set up a little cluster of men holding hands in a circle, heads bowed, and I stood in the hatchway and watched, and I let it happen. I'd rather a man pray than crack. A man with his hands folded is a man whose hands aren't shaking. I made my rounds the way I always did, the way I had for years, because routine is the spine of a crew, and the COB's rounds are part of that spine. Bow to stern, twice a shift, eyes on the gauges, eyes on the people. And the second one mattered more now than the first. I went down through the boat compartment by compartment, ducking through the round, watertight hatches, stepping over the high coamings. I talked to the nukes back aft in the engine room, in that hot, loud world of steam and turbines where the deck plates hum under your boots and you have to lean in close to be heard. And they didn't ask me about reactor parameters or the plant. They wanted to know if their families were all right. A second-class machinist mate named Pharaoh, a kid from Ohio with a young daughter, asked me 3 times in different ways, circling the same question, and I gave him the same answer 3 different ways. I talked to the sonar operators in their dim shack forward, men and women who live inside their headphones and learn to read the ocean the way you read a face. And they didn't want comfort exactly. They wanted to know what was out there. They wanted me to tell them the sea was empty. I lied to all of them with the same line, more or less. We're holding station. We're waiting on command. This is what we trained for. It wasn't a lie about the orders. We genuinely were holding station, and the orders genuinely were to wait. It was a lie about the comfort. We had not trained for this. Nobody had trained for this. There is no drill for the day the entire world stops answering the radio. And the last word you heard from it was infected. On the 3rd day, Solis cornered me by the goat locker, which is what we call the chief's quarters, an old tradition nobody remembers the origin of. He was maybe 22, from El Paso, lean and dark-eyed. And he had a wife and a newborn son he had never met, because the baby had come 3 weeks after we sailed, and he carried a printed photograph of the boy in his coveralls pocket and took it out more than he probably knew. COB, he said, and he kept his voice down, the way men did now, as if loud talk might attract something. Bergen's a NATO hospital, right? That's the other side of the ocean. My wife's in Texas. Whatever this is, it can't be everywhere already. It can't have crossed the whole Atlantic in a couple days. She's fine. Tell me she's fine. I told him she was fine. I looked him in the eye, and I told him his wife and his son were fine. And I had no idea if they were fine. None at all. The honest answer was that we had no idea if anyone anywhere was fine, because the fleet broadcast was the kind of system designed to survive a nuclear war. Hardened, redundant, built to keep functioning when half the country was on fire, and it had gone dark in the time it takes to drink a cup of coffee. I had read the contingency manuals, all of them, over the years. The thick binders nobody reads until the day they need them. I knew what kind of events those manuals planned for, and I knew that not one of them planned for the word the radio man had written by hand and pressed so hard the pen nearly tore the page. Infected. That word does not belong in a naval message. It belongs in a different kind of nightmare entirely. And now, it was loose inside my boat. Okonkwo called me to his stateroom on the third night. His little private cabin no bigger than a walk-in closet, a fold-down bunk, and a fold-down desk, and barely room to turn around. He had the hand-copied message on the desk in front of him, and he'd been staring at it long enough that I doubted he could still read the words, that they'd dissolved into shapes. "Reuben," he said, and he never used my first name in front of others, only in private, only when the captain was setting the captain down for a minute and just being a man. So I knew this was going to be one of those conversations. "I have to make a decision, and I want to make it with you in the room. We can hold here for months. We have the food, we have the air, we have the power. But holding blind is a death sentence of a slower kind. I've been thinking about going up to periscope depth at the next window, raising every mast we have, the comms gear, the photonics, all of it, and seeing what the air tells us, what the surface looks like." "There's risk in that, sir," I said, because that was my job, to say the thing the captain already knew but needed to hear out loud from someone he trusted. If there's a reason the whole fleet went dark, going up to find out could be exactly how we find out the hard way. We don't know what's up there. We don't know if going up makes us visible to something we'd rather not be visible to. "I know." He pressed the heels of his hands against his eyes and held them there a moment. "But a boat full of people imagining the end of the world is a boat that comes apart from the inside, Reuben. I've seen it on lesser things than this. A bad rumor, a death back home that a man can't get to, it spreads. And here the rumor is the truth or close to it, and there's nothing to push back against it. I need to give them something. Even bad news is better than no news, because no news, the mind fills it in, and the mind always fills it in, with something worse than the truth." He folded the message slowly along its creases and slid it into his breast pocket. And the gesture, the careful folding, looked exactly like a man putting away a photograph of someone dead. "We go up tomorrow at 0400 in the dark, in the quietest part of the night, slow and careful. We listen first on every band. We look second. We do not transmit a single watt. We are a hole in the ocean, and we stay a hole in the ocean. Understood?" "Understood, Captain." That night, I could not sleep. I lay in my rack with the curtain drawn, in that coffin-sized space that had been my home so many times across so many years. And I listened to the boat breathe. The whisper of the ventilation, the distant churn of the turbines turning over slow, the small ticks and groans of a steel hull holding back an ocean. The soft sounds of a 130-ton machine keeping 131 people alive in a place that wanted them dead. And I thought about the word infected. And I thought about how a submarine is the one place on Earth where you cannot run from the person standing next to you. There are no exits. Every space connects to every other space. We share the same air, breathe each other's breath, recycled and scrubbed and recycled again. And I did not yet know how soon that thought would matter, how completely it would come to own me. I just lay there, feeling the hull settle. And somewhere in the night, I finally slept. At 0400, we went up. Okonkwo brought her up slow and careful, the way you'd lift a sleeping child you don't want to wake, easing off the depth foot by foot, leveling off at periscope depth with the boat barely making way through the water. The control room was rigged for red, that dim battle lighting that protects your night vision and turns every face the color of old blood. And it makes everyone look like they're already ghosts, hollow-eyed and gray. I stood behind the captain at the periscope station and watched the depth needle creep upward and settle. 60 feet. The diving officer, a steady chief named Pruitt, called the trim soft, the boat balanced and quiet just under the surface. Sonar reported clean water in every direction. No contacts, no screws, no biologics close aboard. Nothing but the empty sea. "Upscope," Okonkwo said quietly. And the photonics mast slid up out of the sail, the fin on top of the boat breaking the surface. And the picture bloomed onto the big flat-screen display at the front of the control room. It was dark up there, of course. 4 in the morning at high latitude, the long northern night. But the camera gathered what little light there was. The faint gray promise of a dawn, still hours off at one edge of the world. And we saw a flat black sea heaving in a slow, long swell under a sky the color of wet slate. Empty. No ships. No running lights on any horizon, not one. And these were shipping lanes, busy water, where you should always see something, a fishing boat, a freighter's masthead light, the loom of a port over the curve of the earth. Nothing. Okonkwo walked the camera through a slow, deliberate 360-degree turn, the image panning across that vast, indifferent ocean. And we all watched in total silence. And the sea was just the sea, immense and uncaring and utterly without us. And somehow that emptiness was worse than wreckage would have been. Wreckage would have meant something happened in a place. This emptiness meant something happened to everything. "Raise the comms mast," the captain said. "Receive only. Let's hear what's on the air." Our lead radio man was a petty officer named Gareth Lull, 36, a heavy-set man from Wisconsin with a slow, careful way of talking, and a genuine gift for plucking a signal out of noise, for hearing the human voice buried under the hiss. He had his headphones half on, one ear free so he could talk to the room. And he began running the bands, his fingers light and practiced on the controls. Military frequencies first. The fleet broadcast, the one that had died. He paused there a long moment, listening, hoping. Nothing. He went up the spectrum, frequency by frequency, the secure nets, the satellite channels, the backups to the backups. Nothing, nothing, nothing. Then he crossed over into the civilian world and hit the International Maritime Distress Frequency, Channel 16, the one that is supposed to have a living human voice on it 24 hours a day in every populated corner of the world's oceans, the channel a drowning sailor screams into. The channel that is never, ever silent. And there was a voice on it. It wasn't words at first. It was a recording, a woman's voice. Calm and flat and unmistakably automated. The cadence of a machine reading a script, repeating itself in English and then in what I am fairly sure was Norwegian and then in French. Lull put it on the overhead speaker without being asked, and the whole control room heard it. Every man and woman, the watchstanders and the captain and me. Evacuation of coastal areas is suspended. Do not approach ports. Do not approach naval or civilian vessels. Remain inland. Remain isolated. This is an automated broadcast. There are no rescue operations. Repeat, there are no rescue operations. And then a pause. A few seconds of dead air. And the cycle began again from the top. The same calm woman, the same impossible sentences, broadcast out across an empty ocean to no one, or to whoever was left. Nobody in that control room moved. Lull's hand hovered over the dial, frozen. Delphine had gone the color of paper, her knuckles white where she gripped the edge of the chart table. Solis, who had no business being in the control room, but had drifted up from the torpedo room and stood pressed into a corner by the hatch, made a small, involuntary sound in his throat, a kind of swallowed sob. And nobody told him to leave. Do not approach vessels. Remain isolated. There are no rescue operations. We turned the words over in the silence, and they did not get any better. Find me a human, Okonkwo said. And his voice was very steady, almost gentle, which was exactly how I knew how frightened he was. That's a machine reading a loop. Machines run on power, and power eventually fails. Somebody set that recording up and then they left, or they died. But they set it up, which means there were people, which means there might still be people. Find me a live one, lol. Don't give me a recording. Find me a voice that answers when I speak. Anybody, anywhere. Lull worked the bands for 20 minutes that felt like an hour, hunched and sweating, sweeping slow across the spectrum, pausing on every flicker of something. Most of it was dead air, that vast, empty hiss of a world gone quiet. Twice he caught fragments that raised the hair on my neck. A man's voice counting numbers, slow and toneless, in a language none of us knew, over and over. The way station operators used to broadcast codes during the Cold War, except there was something wrong in the voice, something that made you not want to hear the next number. And once, a burst of music, bright and ordinary, a few bars of some pop song from before that cut off mid-note as if someone had been yanked away from the radio. And then, low on the spectrum, way down at the bottom where the long waves live, on a frequency that no civilian station and no commercial vessel had any business using. He found a signal so weak he had to lean his whole body into it, pressing both hands to his headphones, his eyes shut. It was Morse. Slow, deliberate Morse code. The dots and dashes spaced out wide and irregular, the rhythm of a frightened amateur who had to think about each letter, who was sending from memory and fear rather than skill. Lull's pencil started moving across the message pad before any of us could ask him to copy it, his hand translating the sound straight onto the page. He copied it twice, all the way through to be certain. Then he turned around in his chair, and his face had changed, the careful professional calm gone out of it, and he read it off the pad in a flat voice that he was working very hard to keep flat. It says, any vessel. This is the research station Hjelm. 62 north. We have the source. Do not let the submarine surface. They are coming up. The infected are coming up from below. The control room was silent, except for the hiss of the speaker. And that calm, automated woman, somewhere out there in the dark over the heaving sea, still patiently telling the empty ocean that there were no rescue operations. I had been at sea 22 years, and I had never once felt the cold that went through me then. It was not the cold of fear, exactly. I knew fear. I had been afraid plenty of times in plenty of ways. This was the cold of a fact arriving, the cold of the floor dropping out of your understanding of the world. Coming up from below. We were below. We were the thing below. We were a submarine, and a man on a radio at the edge of the dying world had just sent a warning across the entire spectrum. The only living message in all that silence, and it was about us. Okonkwo recovered first because that was his job, because a captain who freezes kills his crew. Downscope, lower all masts, comms, and photonics, get them in. Take us deep, 200 feet, ahead 1/3, and come left, new heading. Get us away from that station's bearing. Lull, you stay on that frequency. I want every word he sends. Copy all of it. The boat tilted gently, the deck angling down under our feet, and we sank back into the black where we belonged. Down away from the gray sea and the empty sky and the lone human voice tapping out the end of the world in Morse code. I stood there, gripping a stanchion, a steel pipe running floor to ceiling, holding it harder than the slope of the deck required. and I tried to make the message mean something other than what it plainly said. The infected are coming up from below. It was nonsense. It had to be nonsense. The infected were people, sick people, and sick people did not cruise submarines, and they did not rise up out of the deep ocean. Whoever sent that was panicked or starving or had simply broken under the weight of watching everyone around him die. And his broken mind was making monsters out of shadows. But Halsey Okonkwo was not a man who dismissed data because he did not like the shape of it. He pulled me and Delphine and Lull, and our executive officer, a lieutenant commander named Sayer Tobin, into the wardroom, the officer's little dining and meeting space, paneled in fake wood with a green felt table, and he laid the message pad flat on the table between us and said, "Tell me what this means. Don't tell me what you hope it means. Tell me what the words actually say and what could make a man say them." Tobin, the XO, was 39 years old, ambitious, the kind of officer who always wanted to be seen as the smartest man in any room, who had his eye on his own command someday and let you know it. He went first, leaning back, arms crossed. "It means panic, sir. It means a scientist at some isolated research station watched the world come apart over the radio and started seeing monsters in the dark. Submarines surfacing on their own, infected rising out of the deep ocean. It's nonsense on its face. The pressure alone, the cold, nothing swimming up from the abyss to crew a boat. People crack under isolation and terror. We've all read the case studies. It's textbook. I'd give it no weight beyond confirming that whatever's happening up there is bad enough to break people." "Maybe," Okonkwo said, neutral, giving nothing away. "Delphine." Delphine had already pulled the chart and laid it beside the message pad, and she had plotted the station's position with a sharp pencil, a small, precise circle. 62 north. The bearing he gave puts him roughly here, she said. And she set her fingertip down on a tiny speck in the cold sea, a long way from any coast. "Hjelm. I've never heard of it as a research station specifically, but there are a dozen little Norwegian and joint NATO outposts scattered up here doing oceanography, acoustics, ice studies, the kind of science that needs to be far from everything else. The thing that bothers me, sir, isn't the part about submarines. It's the phrasing of the first part. We have the source." He said it twice. "That is not the language of a man watching the news and panicking. That is the language of a man who knows something specific, a man who has a particular thing in front of him on a table that he is referring to." "And the part about the submarines?" Okonkwo asked, his eyes moving from her to me. Nobody had an answer for that. Lull cleared his throat, uncomfortable, a radio man speaking up in an officers' meeting. "Sir, there's something else about the signal itself. The frequency he chose. It's down in a band that's reserved for hydroacoustic research, sound in water work. The kind of frequency you'd use for talking to instruments underwater, or for studying how sound propagates through the ocean, not for talking over the air to ships." A panicking civilian grabs whatever radio's in front of him, the Marine, VHF, anything. This man reached down into an obscure scientific band that almost nobody on Earth even knows exists. That's a man whose entire professional life is the deep ocean and the sounds in it. That landed in the room differently than Tobin's confidence had. A frightened civilian grabs the nearest microphone and screams. A man who knows precisely which scientific frequency to use, who chose a band designed for the deep, is a man for whom the deep ocean is a lifelong specialty. And a man like that does not casually, in a moment of madness, say the infected are coming up from below. He says it because it is what his instruments told him. Okonkwo sat back in his chair and was quiet for a moment, his fingers steepled. "Here's where we are, and I want everyone clear on it. We have no contact with our command, none, and no way to know if our command still exists. The world above us is broadcasting on a machine loop, telling everyone to stay away from the water and away from ships, and stating plainly that there are no rescue operations. There is no one coming, and we have one station, one human voice, 90 miles from our position, claiming to know the source of whatever this is, broadcasting a warning aimed specifically at submarines, on a frequency that tells us he's a serious man and not a fool. We can ignore it. We can hold here in the dark and wait until our food runs out or our minds do, whichever comes first. Or we can find out what that man knows, because right now, he is the only source of information left in our entire world. Sir, the broadcast said do not approach vessels, Tobin said. We are a vessel. If anything, that warning's aimed at us as much as anyone. He didn't broadcast at vessels generally, Lull said quietly, not looking up. Read it again, sir. Any vessel, any vessel. He's not warning vessels away. He's calling them. He wants someone to come. He's the only human voice on the entire spectrum, and he is asking for someone to come. Okonkwo turned to me last. I had kept quiet through all of it, because the COB speaks last in a wardroom, after the officers have all had their say, so that the enlisted perspective lands as a kind of summary, a weighing. Chief, the crew. Set the station aside for a second. What happens to my crew if we just sit here in the dark and wait? They fall apart, sir, I said. Slowly at first, then faster. We're already seeing the start of it. A man can survive almost anything except not knowing. You give him a mission, even a hard one, even a frightening one, especially a frightening one, and you give him his spine back. He's got something to do with his hands and somewhere to point his fear. You leave him in the dark to imagine what's happening to his wife and his kids on the other side of an ocean he can't cross. And he hollows out from the inside. I've watched it happen on long patrols where absolutely nothing was wrong. This is worse than nothing wrong. This is everything in the world wrong, all at once, and no orders to fight it. We've got maybe a week before the praying turns into something darker. Okonkwo nodded slowly. He looked down at the chart, at Delphine's finger still resting on that little dot in the cold gray sea. Then we go to Hjelm. Quiet. We listen the whole way, the entire transit, full sonar watch. We hear everything before it hears us. We do not surface until we know exactly what is around us. And the first hint, the very first hint, that this man is leading us into something, we leave and we don't look back. Plot it, Delphine. Slow and careful, give me a track that uses the layers, keeps us quiet. I want to be off that station by nightfall tomorrow, one way or the other. That was the decision that changed everything. And I want to be honest with you, because you have come this far down into the dark with me, and you deserve the truth. I agreed with it. I would make the same call again today. We had to know. A blind boat is a dead boat, sooner or later. But I think about that wardroom often, the 5 of us around that green felt table under the fluorescent light. And I think about how every single one of us made the most reasonable choice available to us with the information we had. And I think about how reasonable choices, stacked one on top of another, each of them sound, can carry you step by careful step straight into hell. We ran toward Hjelm for the rest of that day and on into the night, deep and slow, 8 knots, an easy quiet bell, listening the whole way. The sonar shack stayed manned at full strength, every position filled, the best operators on the boat in rotation, because that was where the boat's eyes were, where our only real sense lived. I spent most of my off hours in there, standing behind the operators in that dim blue-lit space full of the soft glow of the displays, because I trusted my own ears, trained by 2 decades of standing exactly there, to catch something that a tired 20-year-old at the end of a long watch might let slide past. The water up there in the high north is strange, stranger than open ocean. It's layered like a cake. Cold, fresh meltwater off the glaciers, and the ice floats on top. And underneath it sits saltier, slightly warmer water. And sound does not travel straight through that arrangement. It bends. It refracts at the boundaries between the layers, the way light bends going into water. And that creates blind spots, shadow zones, places where a contact can hide from you, and you from it. Where a whole ship could sit silent and unheard a few miles off. Our senior sonar operator was a woman named Imani Strand, 28 years old, with the best ears on the boat by a wide margin. The kind of operator who could tell you the species of a whale by its call, and the mood of the ocean by its background hiss. She walked me through what she was hearing as we crept north, narrating the sea in a low voice. Biologics, mostly, she told me. Whales, a lot of them. A pod of orcas off to the east, talking to each other in their clicks and whistles, hunting something. The deep, groaning calls of fin whales somewhere far to the south. The endless grinding crackle of distant pack ice, like a fire that never goes out. Snapping shrimp, somewhere over a shoal. The ocean, when you really listen to it the way Imani listened, is not silent at all. It is loud and crowded and full of life, a constant chorus. And that chorus is a deep comfort to a submariner, because predators make their prey go quiet, and a hunting thing makes everything around it fall still. And a sea full of chattering whales and clicking shrimp is a sea where nothing terrible has happened yet, a sea going about its ordinary business. Around 0200, deep in the dead middle of the night, Imani took her headphones off one ear and frowned, her head tilted, and I knew that frown, and I didn't like it. COB, she said. The biologics just dropped off, all of them. I leaned in and listened to the speakers she nudged toward me. She was right. The orcas to the east had gone quiet. The general background hum of life had thinned out and gone hollow. The way a forest goes dead silent when something large is moving through it, and every small creature in it has decided to hold absolutely still and hope. Could be the layer, I said, not really believing it. We crossing a front? Temperature change will move the fish. Maybe. She didn't sound convinced, not even a little. She put both phones back on and leaned in close to her display, her whole posture changing, going taut. And then her face did the thing I had been dreading all day. The thing where a good operator hears something she cannot classify, cannot fit into any category in 20 years of training and experience. I've got a transient, COB, low frequency, real low, down at the bottom of what I can resolve. It's not biologic. I know every biologic in this ocean, and it's not on the list. And it's not mechanical. It's not a screw. No machinery signature. No blade rate. It's something. Bearing? She was quiet for a second, working the controls. And when she spoke, her voice had dropped. Below us. It's directly below us. COB. And it's coming up the water column. I called the captain. Okonkwo was in the control room in 90 seconds, still pulling his shirt straight, hair flat on one side from the pillow. Imani put the contact on the speaker, processed through the equipment and slowed down so the human ear could grab the shape of it. And the control room, filled with a sound that I've never been able to describe properly, and have never once been able to forget. It was rhythmic. It had a pulse to it, slow and wet and deep, a sound like a heartbeat heard through deep water, a vast, soft thudding. But underneath the pulse, there was a texture, a layered thing, a kind of grinding, chittering chorus. the way a great mass of small things sounds when they all move together, like an enormous swarm, like surf full of gravel. It rose and it fell, rose and fell, and it was, unmistakably, in every fiber of you that knew the difference. Organic, alive. And it was getting louder, which meant it was getting closer, which meant it was rising. "Whale," Tobin said. Too fast, the word jumping out of him. "It's a big whale. Blue whale vocalization, deep dive, it's gotta be. They go down to—" "It's not a whale," Imani said. And she said it with the flat, absolute certainty of someone whose entire professional life had been built on knowing the difference between one sound and another. "I know every whale in this ocean by its voice, sir. I know their calls the way you know voices on a phone. This is not on the list. It is not anything on any list. And whales do not come straight up at you, sir. They don't track. This is tracking us. It is right under us, and it is matching our position, and it is coming up." "Depth of the contact," Okonkwo said. And his voice had gone to that flat command register, all the man stripped out of it, just the captain. 800 feet and rising. 700. It's coming up fast, sir. Faster than a whale could ascend. No whale rises like this. 600 feet. 500. "All stop," the captain said. "Rig for ultra quiet. Now. Pass it on the sound-powered phones. No announcing system." The boat went dead. Word ran through her in seconds, mouth to mouth on the emergency phones, and all over the Cormorant, men shut down every pump they could shut down. Every fan that wasn't keeping someone alive, the laundry, the galley equipment, anything that turned or hummed or vibrated. The ventilation sighed and stopped. The boat got quiet in a way she almost never got quiet, the deep, total silence of a held breath. And we hung there, suspended in the black at 200 feet. 131 human beings standing absolutely still. And on the speaker, that wet, rhythmic chorus rose toward us out of the deep, louder, the grinding swarm sound of it filling the compartment. I have stood through depth charge drills and through real shadowing of hostile boats and through the kind of close aboard underwater encounters that go in no logbook and get talked about by no one. I had never in my life been afraid the way I was afraid in that compartment, because every threat I had ever trained for was a machine with a crew, a thing with a captain, and intentions I could model and predict. A thing that wanted to live as much as I did. This was something else entirely. This was meat and hunger rising up the water column, straight at the place where we floated, soft and pink and warm in our steel shell. And that shell, that pressure hull I had trusted my whole life, suddenly felt as thin as an eggshell. 400 feet, Imani breathed, barely a whisper, as if it might hear her. And maybe it could. 300. Sir, it's going to come up right under our keel. It's right. And then it stopped. Not faded, not turned away. Stopped. The sound cut off the way a voice cuts off when a hand is clapped over a mouth. An instant total cessation, mid-pulse, between one wet beat and the next. The speaker hissed empty. Imani worked her controls, hunting frantically across the bearings, sweeping, and there was nothing. Just the ocean, just the layer. And, very tentatively, the first hesitant returning click of a wary whale somewhere far off, deciding the world might be safe again. We hung there in the silence a long time. Nobody spoke. Okonkwo finally let out a slow breath through his nose. Where did it go? I don't know, sir. Imani's voice cracked on it. It was right there, 200 feet below us and closing. And then it went away. It didn't move off. The sound didn't travel. It just stopped making sound. It's like it knew we'd heard it. like it went still on purpose, all at once, the second we went quiet. "Things don't go still on purpose unless they're hunting," I said, before I could stop the words coming out of my mouth, and I felt the whole control room flinch at the word as if I'd struck them. Okonkwo gave the order to creep away to the southwest at 3 knots, the slowest, quietest bell we had, a speed where the boat barely held headway, and we slipped away from a thing we could not see, moving toward a station that had warned us, in plain Morse code, about things coming up from below. The irony was not lost on a single soul aboard. And here is what I want you to sit with. The way we had to sit with it in that red-lit room with our own pulses loud in our ears. We still did not know what we had heard. We could tell ourselves it was a whale we did not recognize, some deep species science had never properly cataloged, a trick of the layered water playing games with sound. We could tell ourselves a great many comforting things. But every man and woman in that control room had heard the same Morse message an hour and a half before. The infected are coming up from below. And now something had come up from below, straight at us, deliberate and tracking. And it had gone instantly, perfectly still the moment it understood that we were listening. If you have ever been somewhere you couldn't leave, with something between you and the only way out, then you know the particular weight that settled on us. I genuinely like to hear in the comments where you're listening from right now, what time it is where you are, because I always wonder who's out there in the dark with me when I tell these. But stay close, because we hadn't even reached the station yet. And the station was where the real horror was waiting for us. We reached Hjelm's coordinates 11 hours later, in the gray watery light of the next afternoon. Okonkwo took us up toward periscope depth slower and more carefully than I have ever seen a boat brought up in my life. A creeping, cautious ascent. With Imani and her whole shack listening with everything they had to the water below us and around us, every bearing, every layer, waiting for that wet pulse to come back. Nothing came. The water stayed clean. We leveled off at 60 feet, the boat trimmed and silent, and Okonkwo raised the photonics mast, easing it up just far enough to break the surface. And the picture came up on the big display. And there was Hjelm. It was a station built on a small rock island, and I use the word island generously. It was barely that, more of a reef with ambitions, a low gray spine of stone maybe 300 yards long, sticking up out of a heaving sea, the swell breaking white and constant around its edges. There were low concrete buildings on it, weathered and salt-stained the dull gray of everything in the far north. Hunched down against a wind we could see in the way the spray tore sideways off the wave tops. A helicopter pad, marked with its faded white circle, with no helicopter on it. A cluster of antenna masts and dishes leaning at the sky, and a radar dome like a great white golf ball. And, oddly, off at one end of the rock, a tall steel structure that looked like a small drilling derrick or a crane standing over an enclosed pool. The kind of rig you would build to lower heavy instruments down into the deep ocean through a sheltered opening, a moon pool. There was no sign of life anywhere. No movement, no figures, no lights in any window despite the dim afternoon. And a single door on the side of the main building stood open, banging slowly back and forth in the wind, swinging open and falling shut, open and shut. And Okonkwo zoomed the camera in on it, and we all watched it bang on that slow rhythmic slam. And somehow that one small detail, that unlatched door nobody had closed, told us more about what had happened on that rock than the silent radar dome ever could. "Lull," the captain said. "Raise the comms mast. Receive and transmit, low power, tightly directional, aimed right at that station and nowhere else. Let's see if our Morse man is still breathing. Hail him." Lull made the call. Careful voice procedure, a United States warship calling research station, Hjelm. Please respond. And we waited. For a long minute there was nothing. Just the wind sound and the slow bang of that door on the display. Then the speaker crackled, and a man's voice came through, exhausted past the bottom of exhaustion, hoarse and cracked, with the careful, precise English of an educated European who had learned the language from books and was now using it to describe the end of the world. Submarine. You came. My God, you actually came. Are you submerged? Tell me you are submerged. Tell me you did not surface near the rock. Station Hjelm? This is the warship, Lull answered, glancing at Okonkwo, who nodded for him to continue. We are at periscope depth approximately 1 mile from your position. We have not surfaced. Identify yourself and state your situation. My name is Ansgar Volker, the voice said. I was the lead acoustician at this station. There are 4 of us still alive. We are sealed in the upper laboratory on the 2nd floor of the main building. There were 19 of us 11 days ago. There are 4 now. A pause, and the wet sound of a breath being dragged in. You must listen to me very carefully, because I do not know how long this radio will hold its power, and I do not know how long we will hold ours. You are right now in the single most dangerous place a submarine can possibly be in this entire ocean. You have to get into shallow water, and you have to stay there. They cannot follow you into the shallows. The pressure, they need the pressure. They need the deep. Do you understand what I'm telling you? Negative, Hjelm, Lull said. We do not understand. Say again your situation and explain the nature of the threat. Slowly. There was a long pause on the line. So long I thought we'd lost him. And when Volker spoke again, his voice had steadied into something almost calm. The terrible, flat calm of a man who has decided to tell the whole truth at last. Because he has accepted that he's going to die, regardless of what he says. I will tell you what we did, and then you will understand why I am the most guilty man left alive on this earth, and then perhaps you will help us, or perhaps you will leave us here to die. But either way you will know, and someone should know. 11 days ago, we recovered a core sample and a quantity of biological material from a hydrothermal vent at the bottom of a trench. 4,000 meters down, 2.5 miles straight below us. We had been studying acoustic anomalies coming up from that depth for months. Sounds we could not explain, sounds we could not classify. Living sounds, from a place where the textbooks insist nothing complex can possibly survive. So we sent the equipment down, and we brought material up to study it, to find out what was making those sounds. He stopped. I could hear him breathing. We should never have brought it up. The change in pressure should have killed it. From 4,000 meters to the surface, the decompression alone, it should have torn anything living to pieces. It did not die. It changed. And when it changed, it got into Pernilla, our biologist, through a small cut on her hand while she was handling it. And within 1 hour, she was no longer Pernilla. I watched Okonkwo's face in the red light. He was a man who trusted systems, who needed the world to make rational mechanical sense. And a system was breaking down in front of him, the whole system of the rational, understandable world. And I could see him fighting to hold it together, to keep it in a frame he could work with. Hjelm, you're describing an infection, a pathogen, a disease that moves fast. It is not a pathogen, not in the way you mean the word, Volker said. It does not simply make you sick and kill you. It uses the body. It keeps the body running for its own purposes. Pernilla moved differently afterward. Wrong, too smooth and too still by turns. She did not feel pain, none at all. We saw her injure herself and not notice. She bled black, not red, a thick black fluid. And she could hear us. This is the thing I need you to understand. This is the thing that matters for you. Wherever we hid in this station, behind whatever door, she found us, because she could hear our hearts. I am certain of it. I would stake my life on it. What little of it is left. She would stop in a corridor and tilt her head, just so, listening. And then she would come straight to the exact wall we were hiding behind. The acoustic anomalies we had recorded from the bottom of the trench, those living sounds we could not explain. After she changed, she began to make those same sounds. The same sounds. Do you understand the significance of that? Whatever is in that material, it is one thing, one single thing, now spread across many bodies, many hosts, and it remembers where it came from, and it wants to go back. It wants the deep. The infected do not run inland, the way you would expect frightened, sick people to scatter. We watch them from these windows for days. They go to the water, every one of them drawn to the sea. They go to the water, and they go down. The control room had gone so quiet, I could hear the small servo motor of the photonics mast humming as it held its position, coming up from below. They go down. The pieces were turning over and over in my head, and they were fitting together into a shape that I did not want to look at directly. How does this concern submarines specifically? Okonkwo asked, and I admired the iron in him, the way he kept his voice level and procedural when every instinct in the room was screaming. Because we sent our warning out on every channel we had, Volker said. Into the air, to the mainland, to anyone. And the only thing that ever answered us came from below. Because 3 days ago, a research submersible from the mainland, a crude scientific submersible, came in response to our distress calls, came to investigate, and it submerged just off our reef to approach safely underwater. And we heard it. We have hydrophones, underwater microphones, all around this station. It is our work. It is what we do. We heard the submersible's crew on our own instruments. We heard them talking. And then we heard them stop being a crew. One by one. We heard it happen. And we heard the things come up the water column to meet the submersible in the dark, that rising sound. And we heard the hull breached, the terrible sound of it. And after that, after a long silence, we heard the submersible's own engines start up again, under new management. And it went down, down into the trench. It has not come back up. They have a vessel now, do you understand me? They are learning. They are learning to use the things their hosts knew how to use. And anything that goes deep in this water is going directly to where they live. And they are drawn to the sound of engines and to the sound of human hearts beating in the dark. You are 100 frightened hearts and a nuclear reactor singing in the water. And you came straight to the worst possible place in the ocean to be a submarine. So, now you know everything. Will you help us, or will you run? Either way, for the love of God, go shallow. Go shallow. Okonkwo took his hand off the periscope grip and stood there a moment. He looked at me, and at Delphine, and at Tobin standing tense by the plotting table. And there was a question in his face that no command school on Earth ever prepares a man for. He keyed his own microphone. "Stand by, Hjelm. We need a few minutes." Then he closed the channel and turned to face the room. "That's the thing we heard last night," Delphine said quietly into the silence. "Coming up the water column. Going still when we went quiet. That's what it was. He just described it. It heard our pumps shut down." Imani's voice came over the intercom from the sonar shack. She'd been listening to the entire exchange piped down to her station. "Sir, it fits. It fits exactly. It was tracking us by sound, by our machinery, and maybe by our hearts. And when we rigged for ultra-quiet, when we shut everything down, it lost us in our own silence. Or it went still itself to listen better, to find us again in the quiet. I don't know which of those it was. I don't know which one is worse. Tobin, the executive officer, finally broke, the careful skepticism cracking. "Captain, this is insane, and we are about to make decisions based on it. We are taking the word of a man who has clearly lost his grip on reality. Creatures that swim up from the abyss, infected that crew submarines and pilot them down into trenches. This is precisely the kind of folklore a man invents when he has been trapped and starving and watching his colleagues die for 11 days. I strongly recommend we break contact now, go deep, and run for friendly waters at the best speed we can make. Get this boat and this crew home, sir, while we still have a home to get to." "Run deep," I said. "Run deep, where the thing that tracked us last night lives. The thing he just described without any way of knowing what we experienced. That's the recommendation, sir." I looked at Tobin, and I kept my voice level and respectful because he was an officer and the XO. But I let the full weight of it land. Last night something came straight up the water column at us and went perfectly still the second we got quiet. I heard it, you heard it, we all heard it. And just now Volker described, with no possible way of knowing what we'd experienced 11 hours ago, the exact same behavior. A man inventing folklore in a fever doesn't predict your own sonar contact down to the way it moves. Sir, I don't know what's true here. I genuinely don't. But I know that going deep right now, into the abyss, feels like walking straight into the precise thing this man is warning us against. Okonkwo held up one hand, flat, and the argument stopped. He was quiet for a long moment, weighing it. And then he made the call that I think defined him as a commander, for better and for worse. The kind of call you can only really judge from the far side of it. We test it. We don't argue theology. We test the claim. "Delphine, find me the nearest shoaling water, the shallowest navigable bank within our reach. We move there now, submerged, and we get as shallow as we safely can. If Volker is wrong, we've lost a few hours, and we go on our way. If he's right, then we've put a wall of shallow water between us and whatever that thing was. And then, and only then, once we know whether the shallows actually protect us, we decide whether we can help those people on that rock." He keyed the mic. "Hjelm, this is the warship. We are moving to shallow water as you advise. We are not abandoning you. Say again, we are not leaving you. Maintain your position and your radio discipline. Conserve your power, and we will contact you again within 2 hours. Out." "Thank you," Volker said, and his voice broke clean in half on the second word, the careful, precise English dissolving. "Thank you, thank you. 2 hours. We can last 2 hours, please. There are 4 of us. There is a child. The cook's daughter, she is 6 years old. She came out on the supply boat to visit her mother for a week, and the boat could not come back to take her home before all of this. She is 6 years old, and she is here, with us, in this room. Please come back, please." The channel closed. A 6-year-old girl, in a sealed laboratory on a rock in the middle of a poisoned sea. I watched that single detail travel around the control room, and I watched it change every face it touched, including Tobin's, the skepticism faltering in his eyes. And I understood in that moment that Volker had just made it nearly impossible for us to leave, whether he meant to or not. A child changes the math. A child always changes the math, in every equation human beings have ever tried to solve. Delphine already had the chart up, measuring with her dividers. Shallowest reachable water is a bank to the southwest, roughly 14 miles from here. It shoals up to under 100 feet over a wide area, a big flat shelf. We could sit there in 80 feet of water with the boat fully submerged and trimmed. It's the best protection within range by a long way. Make it so, Okonkwo said. Down scope, lower all masts, take us to 90 feet, ahead 2/3, come to the bank. Imani, you have the water. The instant you hear that signature again, you sing out. We ran for the bank, and I went back to the sonar shack, because I needed to know if the thing was still down there with us. Imani had her whole team straining at the water, leaning into their displays, and for the first 10 minutes, there was nothing. Just the layer and the cautious return of the whales. Then, as we crossed over a patch of deeper water on our way toward the rising shelf of the bank, she stiffened in her chair the way she had the night before. "It's back," she whispered. Same signature, below us, following. Range, closing? It's pacing us, COB. Staying down at about 400 feet, matching our course, matching our speed exactly. It's not closing. It's following us. Like it's waiting for us to come down to it. She pulled one phone off her ear and looked up at me. And her expression is something I will carry with me to my grave. There's more than one now. Last night I had one contact. Right now I'm tracking 3. They're coming together underneath us, COB, converging from different bearings, forming up. They're escorting us, like we're already theirs and they're just walking us home. I went forward and told the captain, and he took us up over the bank into 80 feet of water with a kind of seamanship I will never be able to fully convey to anyone who has not conned a submarine into shoaling water by sound and instrument alone. Threading a 100-yard steel tube through the narrow space between the rising bottom and the surface above, with a margin you could measure in feet, the fathometer pinging up the shrinking distance to the seabed. And as we crossed the line where the bottom rose up to meet us, where deep became shallow, Imani's voice came over the intercom, cracking with something caught between terror and pure disbelieving relief. They broke off. All 3 contacts breaking off, diving, going back down deep. They will not follow us up onto the bank. He was right. Volker was right. They stopped dead at the 100-fathom line like it was a solid wall, like they hit glass. They're circling below the edge of the shelf, but they won't come up onto it. The whole control room exhaled at once, a single shared breath. We sat there in 80 feet of water, the boat barely making way, the bottom close beneath our keel and the surface close above the sail, pinned into a thin sliver of safe water no thicker than a few stacked boats. And below us, at the very edge of the bank where the bottom fell away into the deep, 3 things that used to be men, or used to be something we had no name for, circled and waited for us to come back down into the deep where they ruled. And that, I understood, sitting there, was the real shape of the trap closing around us, because a fast attack submarine cannot do its job in 80 feet of water. We could hide on that bank, yes, indefinitely, as long as the food held. But we could not go home without crossing thousands of miles of deep ocean. And the deep ocean now belonged to them. We had found our safety and our prison in the very same place again. And I was beginning to understand that this entire patrol had become a slow, patient lesson in the difference between the two. And how little difference there sometimes is. What would you have done? Sitting in that control room in the red light? Held station on the bank and let 4 people on a rock die, including a 6-year-old child, because helping them meant leaving the only safe water we had? Or risk the boat and 130 crew for 4 strangers you'd never met? Tell me honestly in the comments. because there was no clean answer to find. And we had exactly 2 hours to find one, anyway. The 2 hours we'd promised Volker became the longest and hardest argument of the entire patrol. Okonkwo convened in the wardroom again, but this time he deliberately brought more people into it, because he understood that a decision of this size could not be made by a handful of officers behind a closed door and then handed down to a crew that would have to live and maybe die by it. He brought me and Tobin and Delphine and Lull, and he had Amani come forward from the shack. And he brought the boat's medical officer, an independent duty corpsman named Quill Mbeki, 33 years old, the closest thing we had to a doctor, a man who could set a bone and pull a tooth and run a sick call, but who had never, in his worst imaginings, trained for what we were about to ask of him. Mbeki had been very quiet, almost gray-faced, since the word infection first crossed the overhead speaker. And I think he already understood, better than the rest of us, what his particular part in this might become. "Lay it out," Okonkwo said, looking around the table. "All of it, every angle. We decide together what we can live with, because every one of us is going to have to live with it." Tobin went first, and he had recovered his composure and rebuilt his argument into something tighter and more defensible. And to his credit, it was a genuinely good one. The kind of argument it cost something to disagree with. "Sir, our duty is to this boat and this crew, 131 people. We've now established, to my satisfaction, and I think everyone's, that the threat is real and that it is depth dependent. They cannot reach us up here. We are right now as safe as it is possible to be. The moment we leave this bank, we are not safe at all. To reach Hjelm, we have to cross deep water, where they are. To take anyone off Hjelm, we have to surface in the open, in daylight or near it, right next to a station that by Volker's own account is crawling with the infected, with 3 of those things already waiting at the edge of this bank for us to do exactly that. We would be risking the certain exposure of 131 people to save 4. The arithmetic isn't close, sir. It's the hardest thing in the world to say out loud, and I hate saying it. But our job is to bring this crew home, not to die nobly on a reef for strangers." "Quill," Okonkwo said, turning to the corpsman. "Medical. If we took survivors aboard off that rock, what's the actual risk to the crew?" Mbeki had clearly been dreading the question, had probably been rehearsing his answer and hating it. "Sir, I have no way to test for this. None. Volker described an infection that incubates in under an hour and changes the host completely, root and branch. He described it transmitting through a cut, through contact with the material itself, or with the black blood of an infected person. If I bring 4 people aboard this boat, and even one of them is carrying it in any stage, I cannot detect it. I have no test, no marker, nothing. I cannot stop it. And we are in a sealed steel tube with no isolation ward worth the name, sir. There's nowhere on a submarine that's truly sealed off from everywhere else. Every compartment connects to every other compartment. We share the same air, the same passageways. If this thing gets aboard, even one person, we do not surface and run from it because there's nowhere to run to. It would go through this crew like fire through dry grass, and it would do it down here, underwater, in the dark, with no exit and nowhere to put the dead. Bringing survivors aboard is, medically, the single most dangerous thing we could possibly do. So, medical concurs with the XO, Tobin said. I did not say that. Mbeki's head came up sharp. I said it's dangerous. I said it's the most dangerous thing we could do. I am telling you the risk in full, so you can weigh it with your eyes open. I am not telling you to leave a 6-year-old child on a rock to die. That is not my call, and I would not want it to be. I'm a corpsman. I just won't sit here and let anyone in this room pretend that taking them aboard is safe. It isn't. Whatever we decide it knowing that. Delphine spoke next, and she did the thing she always did, the thing that made her so valuable, which was to take a tangled human problem and reduce it to its hard geometry. Here's what's actually possible and what isn't, sir, setting the ethics aside for 1 minute. We cannot stay on this bank forever. We have food for somewhere between 50 and 60 days at full rations, less if we want a real margin. After that, we starve, regardless of anything in the water. So this is not a choice between staying safe and taking a risk. We have to leave the shallows eventually. The only questions are when we cross deep water, and how, and whether we do anything useful on the way out. That's the real decision. She tapped the chart. And here's the other thing nobody's put on the table directly. Hjelm has something we don't have, and that no one else alive may have. It has the source. Volker said it twice on the radio, and he said it to us just now. That he has the original material, the core sample, sealed. He said the acoustic anomaly came from one specific trench, and he can presumably tell us which one. If anyone, ever, is going to understand what this thing is, where it came from, or how it might be stopped, that knowledge is sitting on that rock and inside that man's head. We are not just deciding whether to save 4 lives. We are deciding whether to save the only people on Earth, maybe, who know what this is and where it came from. That reframed the entire thing. And I watched it land on Okonkwo, because he was an engineer at his core. And Delphine had just translated an agonizing moral problem into an information problem, into a question of preserving critical data. And that was a language he spoke fluently. The XO saw it land too, and he pushed back. But I could hear his certainty starting to fray at the edges. With respect, Lieutenant, we're a warship. We hunt other vessels. Containing a biological catastrophe is not our mission. It was never our mission. We have no equipment for it, no mandate. There is no mission anymore, I said quietly, and the whole table went still. That's the thing nobody in this room has said out loud yet, and somebody needs to. The fleet broadcast is dead. Command is gone, maybe the entire chain of command above us, maybe Norfolk, maybe Washington. We have no way to know, and no reason for optimism. There may not be a port left on Earth to go home to. Volker just told us the infected go to the water, all of them, which means every coastline on the planet is theirs now, every harbor, every beach. Gentlemen, ma'am, we have to seriously consider the possibility that this boat, right now, the 131 of us, might be carrying a meaningful fraction of the surviving competent, organized, uninfected human beings in the entire North Atlantic. If that's true, even partly true, then the single most important cargo we could possibly take aboard isn't fuel or food. It's knowledge. Knowledge of what did this, and how it works, and where it came from. Not because it's our mission, because there may not be anyone else left in the world to do it. Nobody answered that for a long time. The ventilation hummed. Somewhere far below us, at the edge of the bank, 3 things waited in the cold dark for us to come back down. Okonkwo finally spoke, slow and deliberate. All right. Here's the operational reality, because we can debate ethics and the survival of the species for hours. But in the end, we live or die on procedure, on the actual steps. To get those people off Hjelm, here is precisely what would have to happen. And I want everyone to hear all of it before we decide. We cross from this bank to the station, which means crossing deep water with those things in it. We do it as fast and as quietly as we can manage. But understand, they track engines and they track human hearts. and we have 100+ hearts and a reactor singing in the water. We surface right next to the station, fully exposed on the surface in the open sea, where that submersible they captured took its crew. We launch a party across to the rock in our small inflatable boat, to physically go into a building that, by Volker's own count, holds 15 people who are no longer people, and bring out 4 who hopefully still are. We bring them back across open water and aboard. We seal them in the one space on this boat we can come close to isolating, which is the forward part of the torpedo room if we clear the berthing out of it, and we pray to God that not one of them is carrying it. Then we dive, and we run for the deepest, fastest transit we can manage toward anywhere that might be safe. And we pray those things don't catch us in the abyss in between. He let it all sit there on the table. Every single step of that is the most dangerous thing this crew has ever done. And the heart of the danger is the surface time. The longer we're up there exposed and not moving, the more certain it becomes that those things come up from below to meet us. Exactly the way they met the submersible. Time on the surface is everything. It's the whole game. Then we make the surface time short, I said. As short as humanly possible. Minimum party, our best and steadiest people. In fast and out faster. We don't moor. We don't tie up. We don't linger 1 second longer than we have to. We get the boat alongside. We send the party across to the rock. We recover the survivors. And we go straight back down. 20 minutes of exposure if we're sharp. Maybe less. Who goes across? Okonkwo asked. And there it was. The question that turns a debate into a decision, that takes all the clean, abstract arguments and puts a man's actual body on the line. Because whoever crossed to that rock was going to walk into a building that held a child and 15 things that used to be scientists, with the literal source of the end of the world sitting on a laboratory bench somewhere inside. I do, I said. I'm the COB. It's my crew we're putting at risk, so it's my neck that goes first. That's how it works. I'll take 3 volunteers, the best we've got, and we move fast. Okonkwo looked at me for a long moment, and I knew exactly what he was weighing behind his eyes. The COB is the soul of a boat's enlisted crew, the steady center of it. And losing me would hurt the boat's morale nearly as badly as losing an officer, maybe worse. But he also understood, the way a good captain understands, that if he sent anyone but his most experienced man, and that man died on the rock, the crew would never quite forgive him for it. And that if he sent me and I came back, the crew would follow him through anything that came after. Granted, he said at last. 3 volunteers, your pick. Mbeki goes with you, he has to, because someone has to assess those people before we let them anywhere near this boat's air. And Reuben. He held my eyes. If anyone over there shows a single sign of infection, 1 sign, you do not bring them aboard. I don't care who it is. I don't care if it's the child. Do you understand me? I will not let this thing onto my boat. That is the line, and the line does not move. You bring back clean people, or you bring back nobody. Tell me you understand that before you go. Understood, Captain. We surfaced 90 minutes later, in the failing gray light of the afternoon, a mile off Hjelm. And Okonkwo brought the boat up fast and shallow, blowing the tanks hard, so we broached in a great boil of white water rather than easing up slow, because slow meant longer exposure, and exposure was the enemy. The instant we were up, the clock started running in every mind aboard, a clock everyone could feel ticking. Imani stayed in the shack on the hydrophones, with the boat's lower sonar still in the water, and her job was the simplest and most terrible one on the boat. To tell us the very second anything started up the water column toward us from the deep. I went up through the bridge access trunk and out the hatch at the top of the sail into a wind that hit like a fist, cold and wet and full of salt spray. And underneath the clean salt smell, there was something else. Something rotten and sweet and deeply wrong. A low stench of decay that the wind was carrying out to us off the rock. The smell of meat left too long. The sea was running a low, confused chop. Gray water heaving under a gray sky. Hjelm sat there, gray and dead on the swell, that one door still banging, open and shut, open and shut. And now that we were up and close, I could see what the periscope hadn't quite shown me. There were shapes on the rocks at the waterline. Human shapes. Standing very still in the breaking surf, facing the water, facing us, not moving at all. Just standing there in the cold gray sea with the waves bursting white around their knees and thighs. Looking out at the boat with the bottomless patience of things that have all the time in the world and know it. "They're at the waterline," I said into my radio, keeping my voice flat for the men below. "I count maybe a dozen, maybe more. They're not coming. They're not reacting. They're just watching us, standing in the surf, watching." "They're waiting for you to come to the water," Mbeki said beside me, his voice tight as a wire, his eyes fixed on those still figures in the surf. "They don't have to come out to us. We have to go into them." My 3 volunteers were good people, the best I could have asked for. And I'd chosen them carefully in the minutes we had. So Liz, the young weapons tech with the wife and the newborn son in El Paso, because he had asked to come, had stepped forward first and fastest. And I had looked into his eyes and seen that he needed to do something brave right now, more than he needed to be safe. That the not doing was eating him alive. Imani's number 2 on sonar, a wiry, quiet kid named Doss, because he could handle a small boat in any sea God ever made, had grown up running boats in the chop off the Carolinas. And Mbeki, who had to come because someone had to look the survivors in the eyes and decide. 4 of us in a black inflatable boat, lowered down the curve of the hull into that gray, heaving chop. The submarine looming over us like a great beached steel whale. And ahead of us, a rock crawling with the standing dead. And somewhere below us, in water we could not see 1 foot into. 3 things rising or not rising. We had no way to know which until it was too late to matter. We ran for the lee side of the island, the sheltered side, where Volker had directed us by radio, a small concrete jetty out of the line of sight of the standing shapes in the surf. Doss put us alongside it, clean and smooth despite the swell, reading the water like he'd been born to it. And we tied off fast and climbed up onto the slick, wet rock. And the smell up close was a physical thing now. A wall you walked into, thick enough to gag on. The stench of 15 bodies decaying and walking at the same time. Volker's voice came in my radio, low and urgent, guiding us up a path that wound between the low buildings. "The standing ones will not react to you unless you make the sound of a heartbeat very close to them, or unless they hear you in fear, in distress. They are calm now. They are fed. They took the others slowly, over days. Move quietly. Walk. Do not run. Running makes the sound of fear, the fast, hard heartbeat. And they hear fear from a long way off. It draws them. Come to the blue door at the top of the path. We have it barricaded from inside. We will hear you and open it." We moved up that path in a low crouch, single file, slow and careful, past a window through which I saw a thing that had been a man in a white lab coat standing in the center of a ruined office, perfectly still, swaying very slightly on its feet like a tree in a wind I couldn't feel. Papers and overturned chairs scattered all around it. And as we crept past the window, it turned its head. Slow, deliberate, smooth in a way nothing alive moves, and tracked us. Its eyes were black, edge to edge, no white anywhere. 2 pits of black in a gray face, and black fluid had dried and crusted around its mouth and down its chin. It did not come for us. It did not make a sound. It just turned its head and watched us pass with a focused, total, patient attention that was somehow infinitely worse than violence would have been. The attention of something that has decided it does not need to hurry. So Lise made a small sound, and I reached back and gripped his arm hard, hard enough to hurt, and we kept moving, slow, up the path. The blue door opened as we reached it, hands reaching out to pull us in, and it slammed behind us, and bolts shot home, 2 of them, and I was standing in a small concrete laboratory that stank of fear and unwashed bodies and old food, lit gray by a single high window. And there was Ansgar Volker, a gaunt, gray-haired man somewhere in his 60s, hollow-cheeked, with the red-rimmed eyes of a man who had not truly slept in 11 days, his hands trembling. Behind him stood 2 other adults, a younger man and a woman, both ragged with exhaustion. And behind them, peering out from underneath a steel desk, was a small girl with dark tangled hair, a stuffed rabbit clutched hard against her chest, 6 years old, exactly as he had said. And on a steel bench against the far wall, sealed inside a thick, transparent containment case, a double-walled box of heavy plastic, was a piece of black rock about the size of a man's fist, wet and glistening under the gray light. And even from across the room, even through 2 walls of plastic, I could see that it was moving, very slightly, swelling and subsiding, a slow rhythmic motion, breathing almost. And that motion was the single most wrong thing I have ever seen with my own eyes in 51 years of life. "You came," Volker said, gripping my forearm with both of his shaking hands. "Now listen to me, because we have minutes, not hours. And there's something I did not tell you on the radio, because I was afraid you would not come if I did." He pulled me closer and dropped his voice almost to nothing, as if the standing things outside might hear, which, I had learned, they could. The submersible, the crude research submersible that the infected took 3 days ago, that went down into the trench and did not return. It came back 2 hours ago, just before you contacted us. It surfaced off the North Reef. It is sitting on the surface right now, on the far side of this island. And there are infected aboard it, on its hull. And I believe with everything left in me that they brought it back here for a reason. They heard you coming. They heard your engines from a long way off across the water, days ago perhaps. And they understand now that there are more of you, a far bigger vessel, many more hearts. I do not think the things on this rock are waiting here to take the 4 of us. They could have done that days ago. I think they have all been waiting here for you. The radio on my chest crackled, and it was Imani on the boat, and her voice had gone high and fast and afraid, all the calm professionalism stripped out of it. COB, contacts, multiple contacts coming up the water column toward the boat, fast. And there's a surface contact too, a small surface vessel coming around the north end of the island, heading straight for us, COB. You have to get back here right now. The captain says you have 10 minutes, and then we dive. With you or without you, we cannot stay up here. And outside, all across the island, all at once, the standing things began to move. I felt it before I fully understood it, a shift in the quality of the silence outside. They turned away from the submarine, away from the sea and toward us, toward the blue door, toward the sound of 4 panicked human hearts hammering in a sealed concrete room. They had been patient for 11 days. They had been waiting. And we had just told them, with our fear, with our racing hearts, exactly where the rest of the food was hiding. 10 minutes. I have made a great many fast decisions in 22 years on submarines, and I had never made one with less margin than I had in that room. I keyed my radio. Captain, COB. We have the survivors, 4 of them. 1 is the child. We also have the source material, the original sample, sealed in a double-walled containment case. Volker confirms the infected brought the captured submersible back, and it's on the surface off the North Reef right now. They set a trap, and we walked into it. We are coming back to the boat at a run. Have the small arms party ready on deck to cover our approach to the jetty and be ready to dive the second we're aboard. Mbeki will clear the survivors topside, on deck, before any of them go below. Move everybody now, sir, right now. Reuben. Okonkwo's voice was steady, but I heard the strain stretch tight underneath it. You bring the source aboard, you're bringing a live sample of the thing onto my boat. Mbeki said 1 drop, 1 breach. It's sealed, sir. Double-walled containment designed to hold it. And it's the only way anyone on Earth ever understands this thing or stops it. We don't get a second trip back to this rock. Either it's worth the risk, or none of what we just did meant anything. It's your call, Captain. But you've got about 30 seconds to make it. I was already moving as I spoke, hauling Volker toward the door by his arm, shouting at Doss to grab the containment case off the bench, and scooping up the little girl myself off the floor under the desk because she had frozen solid, and there was no time at all to coax her out gently. Bring it, Okonkwo said, and I heard him decide it, heard the weight come down. God help us all, bring it and run. We ran. We broke out the blue door into a gray afternoon that had transformed itself in the space of 2 minutes. It was now full of slow, terrible movement. The standing things were coming, dozens of them, lurching up off the rocks and out of the doorways of the buildings. Not fast, none of them moved fast, but all of them moving with a horrible, unified certainty straight toward us, converging on the narrow path between us and the jetty, drawn to our hearts like iron to a magnet. Volker had been right that they did not run. But they did not need to run. They were everywhere, and they were between us and the boat. The little girl was a dead weight of terror in my arms, her face pressed into my neck. I want to tell you about the next 90 seconds in full, because they are the hinge on which everything turned. The others ran for the jetty with the survivors, Solis and Doss flanking Volker and the young technician, and the small arms party up on the submarine's deck opened up. Careful aimed fire, single shots, dropping the things nearest the waterline to clear a lane through them. And the flat, hard crack of the rifles was enormous and obscene in that dead gray place. And it drew the infected the way Volker had warned us sound would. Pulled a wave of them toward the guns and the noise and away from our runners, which was exactly the brutal logic of it. I came behind with the case, because somewhere in those 90 seconds, I'd taken it from Doss and handed him the girl. Because Doss had to run the boat, and I was the one who could afford to be slow. A man carrying a heavy 2-handed case cannot fight and cannot really run. And the path to the jetty was filling up with the dead. So I made the second decision of that day in less time than it takes to tell it. Solis, Doss, get the people to the boat. All of them. Go. Don't stop. Don't look back. Mbeki, you go with them. You clear the survivors topside. That's the whole game. Every one of them gets cleared before they go below. Go now. It was partly a lie, what I was doing, and I knew it even as I did it. A man alone at the back of the line carrying a heavy case is not covering anyone's retreat. He is the one who gets caught. He is the sacrifice. But the survivors were the entire point, and the child was already in Solis's arms. And I will never, as long as I live, forget her small white face looking back at me over his shoulder as he carried her down toward the jetty, her eyes huge, the stuffed rabbit gone, lost somewhere on the path. The others ran for the jetty with the survivors, and the small arms party kept up its careful covering fire, dropping the nearest things to hold the lane open. And I came behind with the case as fast as a man can move, carrying 40 pounds of breathing horror in a plastic box. A thing in a torn parka lurched out of a doorway right into my path, black-eyed, reeking, its mouth working. And I did the only thing a man with both hands full can do. I put my shoulder down and ran straight through it, hit it with everything I had, knocked it sprawling onto the rock, and kept going without breaking stride. And it did not cry out, and it did not grab at me. It just rose up silently behind me and followed, patient, relentless, falling in with the others. Mbeki met me at the top of the jetty. He had loaded the survivors into the inflatable already, and he had stayed, come back up the jetty for me, because he was a better man than his fear. And he grabbed the far end of the case, and together we ran it down the slick concrete and half through, half lowered it down into the boat. And Doss had the outboard already running, and we shoved off and tore back across the gray chop toward the submarine. The small arms party fired their last covering rounds and scrambled down the hull and below. And behind us, on the rock, the entire island seemed to pour itself into the sea, the standing things wading out into the breaking surf after us, sinking down under the gray waves, swimming or sinking, I could not tell which, just gone under, coming. And off the north end of the island, the captured submersible sat low and black on the water, with figures standing motionless on its rounded hull, watching us, not pursuing, just watching, with the calm of something that already knows it has won and is only waiting to collect. We came alongside the curve of the submarine's hull, and hands reached down and hauled the survivors up onto the deck out of the pitching inflatable. And Mbeki went straight down the line of them right there in the screaming wind and the flying spray, fast and brutal and utterly professional, checking eyes, checking exposed skin, pressing for the black blood, watching for the wrong stillness, while Okonkwo's voice came flat and final over the topside speaker fighting the wind. Anyone shows a sign, they do not come below. I'm sorry. There's no time and there's no second chance. Mbeki, your call. Fast as you can make it. Mbeki cleared Volker, a hard look in the eyes, a check of the hands. Clean. Go. He cleared the young technician. Clean, go below. He got to the third adult, the woman, and I realized in that instant who she was, the cook, the child's mother, and he stopped. I was right behind him, and I saw exactly what he saw in the gray light. A cut on her forearm, bound up with a torn strip of cloth, and the cloth was stained not red, but a deep, oily black, soaked through with it. And her eyes, when she turned them away from us to find her daughter being lowered down through the hatch into the boat, her eyes were beginning, just at the very edges, just starting to darken. No, she said, before Mbeki could open his mouth, before anyone could say a word. She said it quietly, almost gently, and she took a step back from us, toward the edge of the deck, toward the heaving gray sea. No, I felt it this morning, the change starting. I felt it, and I did not tell Ansgar. I did not tell anyone, because I wanted to see her get on the boat. I wanted to see her safe first. She looked at me, and she was still entirely, completely herself in that moment. A mother, clear-eyed and calm under the black creeping in at the edges of her, holding on to herself with everything she had for just a few more seconds. And she said, "Take her. Take my girl. Get her below and don't let her see this, please." And then Ansgar Volker, who had spent 11 days believing himself the most guilty man left alive on the earth, made a sound I have never heard a human being make before or since. A sound that was torn out of him. And the woman turned and stepped off the edge of the deck into the gray sea and went under. And she did not come back up, and the things in the water took her. And I will hear that sound, and I will see that single, quiet step for the rest of my life, every night, in the dark. There was no time to grieve. There is never time. That is the cruelest thing about all of it, then and now. "Below!" I roared into the wind. "Everybody below! Get below! Dive the boat!" And we went down through the hatches and dogged them shut behind us, spinning the wheels, and the diving alarm sounded its harsh blat through the boat. And the Cormorant slid backward and down off the surface, down toward the safety of the bank. And Imani's voice was already screaming bearings over the intercom. Contacts all around us. Contacts coming up. The captured submersible getting underway and coming after us through the water now. The things in the sea swarming up from below. And the captain conned us flat and fast across the shallows of the bank, with the things breaking off one by one at the 100-fathom line, hitting that invisible wall and falling back into the deep. All of them but the submersible, which followed us up onto the bank into water it had no business being in, into water far too shallow for it, scraping and grinding along the rising bottom, driven by something that no longer cared whether the vessel survived as long as it caught us, until it drove itself hard aground on the shoaling seabed and stopped, stuck fast. And we left it there behind us, beached and grinding and full of the dead. And we ran on into the thin, safe shallows where they could not follow. We had 4 people aboard. No, 3 people and a child, because the child's mother was in the sea behind us now. And the most guilty man left alive was curled on the steel deck of my torpedo room, sobbing into his hands. And inside a double-walled containment case, strapped down to a bench. A piece of black rock the size of a fist swelled and subsided, breathing in the dark. That was the cost, and I want to be honest with you about all of it, because you've come the whole way down here with me. We saved 3 and a child, and we lost not one single man or woman from our own crew on that rock, which, when I think about it now, is a kind of miracle I've never fully understood. And I've replayed those minutes 1,000 times in the years since, looking for the version of events where the cook's daughter still has her mother. And there isn't one. There never was one. The infection was already in her, already changing her, before we ever broke the surface a mile off that rock. The only thing we changed, the only thing that was ever in our power to change, was that her little girl is alive. I tell myself that is enough. Most nights, I almost believe it. We isolated the survivors in the forward part of the torpedo room, sealed off behind a watertight door, the berthing cleared out, with Mbeki watching them in shifts through the small, thick glass port in the door, watching for any sign, any change, his hand never far from a decision I prayed he would never have to make. Then we settled the boat down onto the bottom of the bank in 80 feet of water, resting her on the sand, all quiet. And the captain and I and the officers sat with Ansgar Volker once he could speak again, once he could form words. And he told us the rest of it. And the rest of it is the reason I'm recording this at all, on this frequency in the dark, hoping against everything that someone out there is still alive to hear it. Volker explained, slowly, in his careful broken English, that the thing in the case was not the disease itself. It was the deep sea organism the disease had come from. The host, dredged up alive out of a trench 4,000 meters down. A living thing from a hydrothermal vent in a place where the sun has never reached and the pressure would crush a man to paste. A place humans were never, ever meant to disturb. And the disease, the infection, was simply what happened when something built for crushing black pressure and total eternal dark got loose in the warm, bright, thin-aired, shallow world of human bodies. It infected. It spread through blood and contact. It drove its hosts back toward the deep, toward the water, toward the cold, dark home it remembered in whatever passed for its memory. And it was patient beyond any human patience. And it was getting smarter, learning to use the hands and the knowledge of the bodies it took, learning to use boats, learning, God help us all, to use submarines, to dive them, to hunt with them. And he believed, and over the years I have come fully to believe with him, that the only reason a single one of us is still drawing breath is the simplest, most stubborn fact in all the ocean. The deep things cannot follow into the shallows. The crushing pressure that makes them what they are will not let them rise into the thin, warm water near the surface and the shore. The 100-fathom line is a wall to them, as solid as stone. The shallows are the last safe country left on a drowned earth. So here is where we are. And here is exactly why I am sending this out into the silence. We are alive, on a bank in the cold high north, resting in 80 feet of water, 131 crew and 3 survivors, and one small girl with dark hair who flinches at the sound of the hull settling, with a starving sea full of patient dead circling the edges of our shallow safety, waiting. We have food for weeks, not months. We have the source material sealed in its case, and we have the one man left on Earth who understands where it came from and what it is. And we have a single advantage, one piece of knowledge worth more than the boat itself. And I'm broadcasting it now, on every shallow water frequency I can reach, in plain, clear language, over and over and over. The way Ansgar Volker once broadcast his warning out into the dark, and only the deep ever answered him. If you are out there, if you are on a boat, in a harbor, on an island, on a shoal, anywhere at all with the sea at your door and the dead coming up out of it, stay in the shallows. They cannot follow you into the shallows. The deeper the water, the more completely it belongs to them. And the thin, bright water near the shore, over the banks and the reefs and the shoals, is the only place left in all the world that is still ours. Do not go deep. Do not chase signals or rescue or hope out into the abyss. Do not let your engines and your frightened racing hearts call you out across the 100-fathom line, because something is listening down there in the black, something we woke up and dragged into the light, and it has learned to come up to meet the sound. We are going to try to stay alive on this bank through the winter. We are going to keep the little girls safe and keep Volker working with what he has. Because if anyone is ever going to undo what was done in that small concrete laboratory in the 11 days before the world went quiet, it begins with the thing breathing in that case. And every night I make my rounds the way I always have. Bow to stern, twice a shift, eyes on the gauges and eyes on the people. The same as I have done for 22 years. Except now, at the end of every round, I stop at the forward torpedo room. And I look through that small, thick window at a 6-year-old girl asleep on a cot. And I think about her mother stepping off the deck into the gray sea so that her daughter could see another morning. And I think that there are worse things to spend a life protecting. The hull still groans when the tide shifts across the bank. I hear it now. I hear everything now, every creak and settle and tick of the steel. And sometimes, in the deep, dead hours of the night watch, on the hydrophones, faint and far below us at the very edge of the shallows where the bottom falls away into the dark, Imani still picks up that slow, wet, rhythmic chorus, rising and falling, patient as the tide itself. The sound of the things that came up from below, circling the edge of our safe water, waiting for us to make the one mistake that sends us back down to them. We lost contact with the world 6 hours after the first infected was reported. We have been in the dark a long time now, longer than I ever thought a person could bear. But we are still here, on our shallow rock in the cold, broadcasting into the silence the only thing we have left that is worth saying. Stay shallow, stay quiet, and whatever it costs you, whatever you have to leave behind to do it, do not go deep. This is the USS Cormorant. We are still alive. Tell us, if there's anyone left out there to answer, where you're listening from tonight, and whether you would have stepped off that boat onto that rock to bring back a child you'd never met. We will be on this frequency at every tide, for as long as the boat holds together and the dead stay below the line. We're still listening. We hope, more than I know how to say, that you are too.